Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the Doug Show. It's Doug Cunnington here, and we're going to talk about site speed today and some core web vitals. I'm joined by an expert, a good friend of mine, a beer drinking friend of mine named Matt Giovanisci. How are you today?
I'm good. Am I an expert?
I think so.
Okay.
You know more than me.
All right.
So,
Therefore, expert.
and I think we're going to hopefully get into some topics that, we haven't explored too much. I don't talk too much about site speed because
It's technical.
it's a little technical,
Yeah.
and I usually stay out of the weeds. Now, we are, for the people that are only listening, Matt and I are down in the studio. Our friend Georgie is laying on the floor with us. She smells a little bit funky. She was swimming earlier, so she smells like a wet dog. So we're trying to get past it, and we are enjoying a wit beer that Matt brewed, which is delicious.
Wet dog. Mm.
Yeah. It all blends together really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right, we are going to get into the meat and potatoes. We're not going to beat around the bush. What are some of the biggest mistakes that people make with site speed if they're having issues?
I think like the one thing that I've come across, like most people that talk to me, they'll say like, I've done everything that you've suggested, and yet, my site is still not passing all the core web vitals, and it's still super slow. The number one reason that is because of hosting. And it's because they're usually on some like crappy hosting company that's like super cheap, and the actual load time of the original page, even if they've done everything else to make it fast, the hosting company serving that up is just going to be slow. Now you can probably solve that with like CDNs and stuff, but I've had so many people where I'm like, you need to change hosting companies. They change hosting companies, and all of a sudden, like it takes off. Like their site just is like lightning fast. And I've seen people even change hosting companies and see their traffic increase by like 3 times just doing that one thing. So for me, I think like that's the number one thing that people get wrong is just hosting.
Okay. And I'll layer on. So I do know a little bit about hosting, so maybe I sold myself a little bit short there. I would also contend that if maybe you love your hosting company for some reason, maybe they have great support.
I don't know if anyone loves their hosting company.
It's a commodity.
It
doesn't really matter. It's
right,
like where do you buy gas? So
right. Yeah.
Basically, if people have signed up on the cheapest or a cheaper shared hosting plan, and most hosting companies have a full suite, a wide range of, I guess, traffic capacities that certain hosting packages are good for. So people get the cheap hosting starting off, totally fine.
Totally fine.
They get more traffic, and then all of a sudden they're getting, 3,000 visitors a day. Well, they need to upgrade their hosting. So if you love your hosting company, see if there's a better package for you, something that is suitable for the amount of traffic or the kind of website. Like if you have a membership website, for example, maybe you have some processor intensive things going on.
Right, exactly.
So that said, I'll let you, if you have a preference for a hosting company.
I mean, I personally use WP Engine. I know there's some people who say that they're a little expensive. I've heard good things about Kinsta, and the other one I've heard good things about is SiteGround, but those are the 3 that I feel comfortable recommending. I'm like, you're probably pretty good with those 3.
All right. Yeah. And I have probably half my sites on SiteGround.
SiteGround, yeah. I've heard good things, and they're like the most affordable.
Yeah, pretty
so
affordable. Yeah. And I will say, as they've grown, their support hasn't been as good as it used to be. Still very good.
I felt the same way about WP Engine, though.
Yeah.
So yeah, makes sense.
And then I have I'm on like a smaller hosting company too called Mdd Hosting, and they're great. I mean, I think it's probably like 4 people or something. It's very small, but it's affordable. And as I mentioned, if you know what package you should get, then you could just pay a little bit more and you have like more processors, more memory, all that stuff. So,
all right, yeah.
Cool. So hosting, make sure you're on the right sort of package for the traffic you're getting. So any other tips with hosting?
No, There are some tips like with a CDN that I think you can save a lot of money with hosting, because a lot of hosting companies, and I'm specifically talking about WP Engine since that's what I use, they will bill you, or the package that you end up going into is based on how much traffic you get to your website, because they have everybody that comes to your website and loads a page, like you're using their hosting resources to load that page, so that has to tap into their databases and whatever, and so they charge you like on an amount. So it's like, hey, if you get 100,000 people to your website a month, or if you're having if you have multiple websites hosted and that's your account, it's like you're going to think that you need to go to the higher plan, when in reality you just need to interrupt it with a CDN so that they don't count all of those visitors as visitors, like they're counted elsewhere.
So hosting is a big thing that people need to watch out for. What's the next biggest mistake that folks make?
Probably the theme of their, if you're on WordPress, which is what I use, a lot of people use themes that are just incredibly bloated, or theme builders that have to be bloated because they're accounting for everyone's customization. And so ideally you'd want to only load the code that you need to view your page. All other code is bloat. And bloat, even though it's like, lines of text, there could be a lot of assets that are being loaded as well that are, from third-party hosting, like, even like a Facebook pixel, it's got to tap into Facebook's JavaScript, which is located on Facebook's website. And if that's not fast, that can slow down your website. So, and then like some people use, like different fonts that have to get loaded from like Google Fonts. And like, there's all these things that, just because of customization purposes, you end up like loading all of this unnecessary code that you don't need for your own page. So ideally, in an ideal world, you would design your theme from scratch and only code what you need. Or in this case, like I always, recommend to you just go and, just use a theme. Like you don't need a builder plus a theme, or like I know a lot of people use child themes, and I never really understood. It's like a theme on top of a theme. Like just a theme is a theme. So I don't know,
I do know that one. So child themes should be used when basically you are making some changes or customizations and you don't want to lose the like master style.
It's getting crazy.
Sorry. Georgie is she's harassing.
Oh, she wants to play
Matt. So this is highly unprofessional, but we're just rolling with it.
Is it unprecedented?
This is fairly rare. I often don't let her down here. She's recorded with Carl and I on the other podcast a couple times.
Okay.
And she is a pushy little bitch. So,
alrighty.
Back on topic.
Literally.
Yeah, back on topic. So the child theme, basically if an update is pushed through the main theme,
right,
and you have customized some code, right, then you lose your changes. So one can use the child theme to make sure you don't lose those changes.
And that makes sense. Like if you're going to use something like Bootstrap to start, or like use Bootstrap Grid, which is what I use a lot. Like I download Bootstrap Grid, host it locally, but then I don't change anything in that CSS file. I have another CSS file that I make all my changes in on top of what's already there. So that if I decide to switch, to Bootstrap 5 from Bootstrap 4, all of my customizations will hopefully still be good, or I have to change them depending on what they change in their code. But I get that.
Do you have any bloated themes that you especially hate? So if you wish to rant on any
no,
specific
because I don't know what's out there. I've always, since the day I started my website in 2004, I've coded everything myself. So I never used a theme in my life.
Okay. Interesting.
If that makes any sense.
Well, 2004 is before WordPress.
I was coding everything in HTML.
Yeah.
Like individual HTML pages.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And then when WordPress came out, I just built my own theme from scratch.
Okay. Makes sense. Interesting. No, I didn't know that.
That's that's why my theme is like, it's old technically.
Got it.
And it's had so many iterations.
there are several, basically any page builder, I will blanket and say, I don't like it. You can use a page builder and have it load fast if you're smart about what's implemented. And there are ways to do it, but I had a bad run-in with Thrive themes.
Yeah.
And I used that, set of functionality for, a little while. There's themes, and then they have their page builder. And I used both for a little while, and it just was hard to use. And one of the big problems, right, if you go that route, and I'm not sure if all page builders are, the same.
Yeah, the same, yeah.
But if you want to migrate to another theme, you're kind of roped in with a bunch of cruft and a lot of the garbage that you were talking about. You may have short codes on every single post all over the place.
Yeah.
So it makes it a huge issue with migration. For me, I just want flexibility. So if you can use a simple theme that doesn't have that and makes it easy to migrate off, of course, the theme company wouldn't want you to be able to migrate off in an easy way.
Into the business model for sure.
But the biggest issue that I had with Thrive was the poor customer support. And I know a lot of people still recommend them a lot, and they're called affiliates. So you can't really trust what they're saying.
Right.
And technically I still have an affiliate account, but I actively tell people don't use Thrive. And it's a bad theme.
Yeah. All right.
Set of themes. Don't like it.
Okay. You heard it here first.
Yeah. All right. So anything else with themes?
Plugins.
Okay. So next, plugins.
Yeah.
All right. What's the gripe with plugins?
That's, most of the things that you want to do, like there is a plugin for that. It's like, remember that there's an app for that. There's definitely a plugin for it. Anyone can code a plugin. Like you understand, like anyone. I can code a plugin and sell it to you, and I have. And anybody can update a plugin, and there's really no checks and balances that have to go through. A plugin that you update can break your site, and it's happened a million times. So if you have automatic updates on your plugins turned on, I highly recommend you shut that off, because you might wake up one morning and your whole website's down because one developer who has no checks and balances within their development, maybe they don't do any testing whatsoever. And that's, I would say 90% of plugins probably don't have any testing built into their code base. Your site's going to go down. And so I try to only stick with plugins that are like highly reputable. And I try not to use plugins for front end stuff, as much as I can. Front end stuff being like design elements, share buttons, those sorts of things. And a lot of plugins, they do a lot, and they come with a lot of bloat. And the reason why I don't like the ones that are more for front end is because they load their own JavaScript and their own CSS files on every page, because that's just how you do it. And you keep adding plugins, you're adding more and more code bloat, just like you would with a theme builder, because it's like it's built for everyone's customization. So yeah, plugins, I less is more in that realm, for sure.
How many plugins do you have on
probably
your
10?
Site? Okay.
A couple of them are back-end plugins only. Like I love Admin Columns Pro, which has nothing to do with the front end of your website. It lets you like customize the way that your like posts are organized in those rows, which I love and I pay for. Yoast is kind of front end, but not design elements. It's just all text elements. Yoast SEO specifically. And then I use WP Rocket for caching and other things. And that's all back end for the most part. Or optimization for the front end and not design elements. And so, yeah. And then I have my own little plugin that I built as like a little calculator that I can add short codes. And then Lasso is another one, Lasso is probably the only plugin that I had a hand in building, but also is a plugin that does do front end stuff, but I had a hand in like making sure that it's not code bloat. And Andrew is probably more of a site speed warrior than I am. So he's the head developer behind that plugin. So I would say you're probably safe to use that for front end stuff.
I'm surprised that you use Yoast because it has become bloated.
Okay.
I hate that plugin. By the way. I don't use it.
I'm glad you brought that up because I literally have like a to-do in Asana for myself of try rank math. And I have been using Yoast forever since I started using WordPress. It's really difficult for me to move. I'm going to test it on one of my smaller sites to see how I like it, but I'm probably going to move to Rank Math. Good. What do you use, Rank Math?
I use Rank Math now, but I just started using it in the last couple months.
Yeah. And is it great?
It's fine. I would prefer not to use, like for a long time, I didn't use an SEO plugin.
Yeah. I kind of feel like they're like a necessary evil.
I think you can get by without it. I was running into a couple issues with like sitemaps that could have been solved with
like a simple sitemap plugin.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was using a simpler one, but it was so simple that it was missing some of the nuances of things you don't want to index, and you don't want them on their sitemap. So potentially it was something that could be fixed, but Rank Math should be fine.
And you can just install Rank Math and it like imports everything over from Yoast, I think, right?
That's the idea.
Yeah, that's the idea.
I can't comment on that because I wasn't using Yoast before. And I used Yoast back in the day, but it got bloated. It tries to be a little bit too much.
Okay.
And then with the keyword, here's the biggest gripe with the keyword research and it does more harm. So I would just come out pretty strong and say like, Yoast is a terrible plugin. Don't use it.
Okay. I'm not here to defend it because I am actually in the process of potentially moving to Rank Math. Yeah.
Good.
And I should just bite the bullet, right? I should just do it.
Yeah. It'll take a little while. And if you
I just didn't want to do it at the height of like the high traffic season for me. And so that's why I'll try it on my smaller sites and just see how it plays out. All
right. I'm going to press you on something here with Lasso. So I've used it some. I haven't had major issues. I had some feedback when I first started using it.
Yeah.
One of my students said that they had a lot of issues and it seemed like you guys, I don't know if you were working with Lasso at the time, that you weren't testing the code before you would roll it out.
Right.
So
that's why I mentioned that earlier.
Okay. It was like, hey, we made changes and then shit would break.
Yeah.
So my student said, oh yeah, it happened like 6 times. Guy works in software, right? He has a similar background as me. So I have low tolerance for not testing, rolling it out, all the process and checks and balances, like all the stuff you were talking about. I have low patience for that. So this guy did too. He said, fuck it. I'm just going to code my own solution. So he got rid of Lasso and he was like, I'm out. So any comment to that?
I'm pretty sure they are testing now. Last I talked to Andrew yesterday, it was like everything they've been doing since I left has been bug fixes. So and I know that they're a part of like an accelerator program, so they're getting a lot of like developers who are like and he's always been, ever since when I was working on the plugin, like that was the thing that bothered him the most that we weren't doing, but it was like we were competing against customers who wanted features, and then it's like, but if we take a break and do testing, like the business doesn't grow, but it helps it later on. So they have enough developers now where I believe they got the testing all implemented, and they were also able to build features at the same time. So, I believe, so it's certainly better. For me, even as a user, like I use it on all my sites, and I have nothing to do with the software. I don't get paid at all. I don't see a dime from it. But I use it in all my stuff, and I have noticed that it's gotten like way better since I left. And not because I left, but just like I know he's focused a lot on that, And that's just from that's me knowing him, but then that's all, and him telling me, but then also I've noticed it personally on my stuff. So I get it. I get it though. Yeah.
It's a good answer. And that is...
Thank you. I worked really hard on it yesterday.
It is exactly why companies can only work on one thing at a time. In a younger company, you can't have all the features and,
bulletproof. Yeah.
And you have to prioritize what you're working on, right? Think of like some of the Apple products that we have, right? How shitty were some of the
in the early days? Yeah, buggy as hell. And even now, like you get like OS updates, and it's buggy the first iteration, and then 14.2 comes out and it's like a little better, and then 14.3 comes out and it's like a little better, and then they redo it all and it's like 15, it's like buggy again, and then it just keeps getting better, because at the end of the day, and this is what sucks about WordPress, is that we're not in control as developers of the system, whereas Apple is. Apple builds the iPhone. So, and they know, and they can test it on all of their hardware devices, but what they can't test is what other apps that you have on your phone that they didn't think of that would conflict with their, update. And so I would imagine a lot of the bugginess comes from apps that didn't, get with the update. And it's and everyone complains oh, it's Apple's fault. It's well, it's probably the third-party developers' fault for not getting their updates done fast enough, and because they have all of that stuff before we do. So, the same thing with WordPress. WordPress is even worse because every theme is different, every plugin is different. It's developed by a bunch of there's so many plugins, and there's no control over the hardware whatsoever, or the hosting, or any there's so many more variables. So, that's why I tend to gravitate towards plugins that are larger and have established themselves a little bit more, and probably are run by a bigger team than just one dude, or usually one dude or one person, could make a really kick-ass plugin. Honestly, as long as it's super super because there's certainly plenty of those. So that's why I tend to, that's why rank math is catching my eye, because it seems like a legit, it's way better. It feels like a better product, and it feels like it's big. So I'm okay, I feel safe using that.
There's a lot of users now. Yeah.
Yeah. And plus, if you have a theme that doesn't really if you don't have a lot of plugins to begin with, and your theme is relatively light, you don't have conflicts.
Right.
It's harder to have conflicts.
Yep. And one last point on the software development lifecycle and all that stuff. Just, knowing that Apple, for example, or, bigger companies, they may know the bugs are in there and they roll it out anyway, because it's just ship it. Yeah, get it out. We'll fix it later.
Out. We'll get the feedback. We'll fix it as fast as possible.
There's going to be a workaround, and if it's not going to impact that many people, so we're not going to do the recall the
toughest
Fight Club.
No, and the toughest part about Lasso is it's so many people's earnings. It's tied to their earnings, so it's even more important that it's done correct. Remember Yoast had an update that went out,
the image thing.
Yeah. It was just a setting, a checkbox, and it auto checked in an update, and it screwed a lot of people's websites up. And I think that's probably why a lot of people started moving away from them, which is unfortunate, because it's they've been around for so long, they've been doing good work, but then once it was sold, I think it was sold to a bigger company, and all of a sudden now it's what you're saying, it's bloated.
Yeah, there's a little too much. Okay, so those are the main mistakes. We got hosting, themes that maybe aren't great, especially page builders, and then maybe too many plugins. Yeah. So I would say look and think about your plugins, and if they are not 100% essential for the functionality, then you should figure out how to get rid of it.
Yeah.
100, essential for the functionality. So again, if you have a membership site, you need some kind of membership software, for example. But if you're just trying to get some sharing buttons, or you want to have the widget show up in a certain spot or something like that, you probably don't need the plugin.
Yeah, you can just code that.
Yeah.
Or get somebody to code it for you.
Fairly straightforward. Okay. So a couple more kind of specific questions in certain areas. So you mentioned the caching plugin that you like to use.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little about it and why do you like that one over others?
It's called WP Rocket, and it works. It plays very nice with WP Engine, which is how I stumbled on it. A friend of mine who runs a site called Minimalist Baker told me about it when I was visiting in Portland, and he was using WP Engine at the time. I'm not sure if he's still using it or not, but when I was using a plugin called Auto Optimize, which is free, and I was doing all my own coding for lazy loading and like all kinds of like goofy shit, you know, and then I saw WP Rocket, and it did a lot of the things that I had hand coded myself, and I decided to try it out, and I'm like, oh, this is just it's so good. Like it does everything really well. It can do a lot of back end stuff that like I could never would think of, and I think the biggest saver for me as far as page speed with that plugin specifically is the lazy loading and how effortless that is, and the biggest one is the lazy video loading for YouTube videos. That was the huge struggle for me, because if you embed a YouTube video on your website, it slows down your website. And it's ironic because it's Google's product, but they have to load so many JavaScript files, and it's just an insane amount of code that is baked into that iframe. And so when you add the plugin, when you add WP Rocket, then you can opt to have the thumbnail sort of like generated as an image with a play button in it. And then that's what's displayed, and that's lazy loaded. And then it's not until someone clicks that image does it turn into the iframe and loads the iframe. So it really helps with like the initial load of your web page and then the interactivity of it. So that's why I like it, because it's just like it solves that problem, and it's always updated, and it's run by a big team, and it's it's a legit plugin.
Mm-hmm. I've heard it recommended many times. In fact, someone I know recommended it to me today.
Really?
And
was it me just now?
One of my friends, a second ago. The video thing is a good point. I've seen data that suggests it takes about 1.5 seconds for just one embed. And then if you have multiple embeds, it's another 0.5 seconds.
That was huge for us because we like to embed our videos. I was a little worried that taking away the embed code would hurt us in ranking, because we have YouTube, so it's like, hey, they're like, Google knows that we're embedding a YouTube video on our website, so like, does that give us a little bump in YouTube or in Google? The answer is no. It did not affect it at all, and our rankings didn't shift whatsoever when we switched over.
No impact. Yep.
No impact. No.
So I don't use WP Rocket. I use, I think it's WP Fastest Cache, something like that. It's a fairly lean one. I use a premium version of it.
There are some caching plugins, and I don't know this off the top of my head, that don't play nice. And in fact, WP Engine, the hosting company, will just disable it, like on your platform. They're like, no, we don't mess with this. That is another. I mean, that's why I like WP Engine, because they're like, if a plugin sucks and it really sucks, like they will just not let it load on your site. It'll just be disabled, automatically, which is like, okay, that's pretty good. It sucks though if you want to try to use a plugin, but it's like, no, they know better.
They do. Yeah. And that was one of my gripes with them. I was like, I'm not going to use them because they're telling me what to do. And then they're so expensive.
Right.
So
they are expensive. Yeah.
The other part is, so with the WP Fastest Cache, it doesn't have the video embed, lazy load. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I use a plugin by DIY Themes or DIY Plugins, and it's the YouTube Performance plugin that does the same functionality.
Same thing,
and it's relatively inexpensive. You don't have to use it. It works with any theme.
Yeah. I also think WP Rocket has like a free version of their lazy load, just a lazy load feature. I don't know if it does the video part, but I know it does the images. And it's just called Lazy Load by WP Rocket, and it's free.
Got it.
So if you don't want to, use all their stuff, although I recommend it.
You may as well. How much does it cost? Like $50 a year or something?
I think it's like Yeah, I think it's $50 a year.
Okay.
I just paid like a one price and I have it forever.
Oh,
yeah.
They probably don't offer that anymore.
I don't.
Do they?
They might not. You know.
Yeah.
But it's like you can. Yeah, it's like I have 3 sites on it, so I think I pay like $200 a year or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
worth it for me. I mean, yeah, huge for me.
I got that deal with the WP Fastest Cache, so I think I paid whatever $60, and now I have it like
forever,
lifetime on that site or a couple sites.
Yeah.
Okay. Content delivery network, CDNs. How important are they?
I only use one. I use Cloudflare. I think it's essential, honestly. Well, for me, if you want WP Engine to be cheaper, like I only pay I think it's $100 a month for all 3 of my sites, which just seems like a lot of money, but one of my sites gets like millions of visitors a month. So it was, and that doesn't fit into the plans that they offer, right? It's like, oh, if and they in the beginning they were trying to upsell me, and I did pay for it. At one point I was paying $600 a month for hosting because I wasn't using Cloudflare. So in their eyes, every single time somebody visited my website, they were counting it on their end as a visitor. That's normal. And so they were like, you're getting, so I was like paying a lot of overages, and they're like, you should be on your own dedicated virtual machine. I was like, okay, I don't really know anything about hosting at the time. So I'm like, fine, put me on that. How much does it cost? $600 a month. Jesus, I guess, whatever. And then I learned that like if I installed Cloudflare and had a content delivery network that would deliver my website, a cached version of my website, instead of that visitor hitting WP engine servers every time, they're now hitting the CDN servers, which is free. It counted like, an eighth of the visitors or whatever it was. So all of a sudden I'm getting like less than 100,000 visitors a month, even though I'm getting way more than that.
Got it.
And it's free. Like it's a free intermedium. And plus like I use GoDaddy for my domains. I've always just used them, and not that I, would recommend it or whatever, but just kind of like the early days, that was the only thing, you watch the Danica Patrick commercials back in the day. It was like, I guess that's my hosting company. It's whatever. I think the owner is a douche, but it is what it is. So I have that, but I hate managing the DNS through them. So if I ever have to do like, adding text or CNAMEs or any of that stuff, like I just hate it logging into GoDaddy. Like I just hate it. So with Cloudflare becomes the DNS, and it is a much easier, well-designed system for changing those things. And then, the Cloudflare has all types of like page speed stuff that you can just like click a button and your site's just faster. So I currently pay $20 per site because I have some multiple rules and I wanted access to some speed stuff. And I also pay for something called Argo, which is traffic routing for even faster speeds on my website. So I end up paying like $80 a month for my CDN. Okay. So yeah, I mean, like honestly, if you like break it down, I'm paying like $100 a month for hosting, another $80 a month for CDN, $50 a year for WP Rocket. It's like, yeah, I'm investing money into page speed for sure. Mm-hmm. And I think, we'll get to it, but it's like obviously a big deal. And I heard something today about what Google's doing that I was not happy about, but I get it kind of. It's the they're actually like outrank. You can get, if someone steals your content and their website's better, they'll outrank you because your website sucks. So like that's interesting. So they're rewarding bad behavior, but in the like in the service of the searcher,
So if someone takes your content, obviously, if they take your content without permission, then you can have it taken down.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
You could just, by the way, if people don't know how to do that, just look up the, what is it? The DCMA, Digital Copyright Millennium. So basically you can have their site shut down in pretty quick order. Just contact their hosting company. You have to do a few like official things.
Hoops. Yeah.
it's fairly straightforward. And I've had sites taken down before. Yeah. They do. Hosting companies will do this really quickly. So if you try to contact the webmaster and they ignore you, I don't even try to contact the webmaster because they took your content, right? So they're probably not going to.
No. Some people don't know those. Like some people, I've had people copy and paste stuff and I go, you can't do that, right? And they're like, no, I didn't know that. I'm sorry. And they take it down. I've had that happen.
So you actually try to contact the individuals?
I do that first because most of the times for me, it's so like I'm in the pool industry. And so like I have helpful content that teaches people how to take care of their pools. And then a local little pool company that starts up is just trying to help their customers. And they think the internet, they're older people and they think the internet is just free for all. So they think, oh, well, this site has good content. I'll just copy and paste that, put it on my site so that it helps my customers.
All right.
And they mean well. Like in the end, they mean well. And I literally had to do that like 4 or 5 times throughout my lifetime to be like, literally had phone calls with the owner. And it's like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. And it's like, it's okay. Right. Just don't do that ever.
Okay. That's better. Yeah. The context helps.
Yeah.
I was
a little bit. On. And not every case. I mean, there's obviously some cases where it's like just scraping my stuff and they don't mean well.
Yeah.
But yeah, apparently I kind of just like read the headline today and I have somebody that I know is very heavily into SEO is like, this is an infuriating thing. There's a video on Search Engine Journal, I believe, about it. So you can look it up. It's not, but Google's rewarding bad behavior, which is basically them saying like, we're going to just serve like the best experience for the searcher. And I think at the end of the day, that's just like an indicator to be like, your site better be like user friendly and fast and like just the user experience is like everything. And I think it's only going to get more important.
Well, and I could go on a big tangent here, but we say that we understand user experience. Also, Google is an ad company, so they're like showing ads, and ads suck. I mean, like we generally don't want to see them. So there's definitely a weird balance, a yin and yang that they have to figure out. And I hope from the intellectual property standpoint, I hope they figure it out in a suitable way, or the people that own the IP, things that are being copied, like we'll put out the tool so they can get it shut the websites down. People that are copying shit.
Yeah, but you could argue that like, the featured snippets is Google stealing your content.
I agree. I agree with that. Yeah, but it's like, all right.
Like what else you have? The thing I always say about Google is like, Google, their entire mission, the only reason they exist as a company is if you search something and you get what you want, right? So their job is to make sure that you are a satisfied user, and they're an ad company for sure, but that's their first and foremost mission is it's a satisfied searcher every single time. And so it makes sense in a fucked up scenario that if there's a piece of content that is perfect and it's served twice on 2 different websites, but one website is faster and looks better, why wouldn't Google's algorithm favor that one over the original one if the original one sucks so much? Because if the idea is that you search something and you land in a site and it loads fast and it's there and it's nice and it's easy to read, you're like, I got exactly what I wanted. I'm a satisfied searcher. Whereas if you saw it on an original site, which was, built in 1994 and it sucks and it loads like shit, it's like, I mean, it's messed up in general, but like I just think of it from that perspective of like, it's another like, reason to focus on user experience.
When I put on my searcher hat, then yes, I agree 100% because I would bounce from a site that's not loading and go to the one that does load.
Exactly.
I don't care who it doesn't matter to me.
It doesn't matter to you.
When I put on my content, and I'm a publisher and
you're pissed.
Yeah.
But you know what? We live and die by the sword of Google. It's like, what else do we have as SEOs? We're going to just like, oh, screw Google. Let's just focus on Bing only. It's like, good luck with no business.
Yeah, it is. It is a balance. Well, and that's why we do other stuff too.
Yeah, you have to build in other ways,
Yeah. Okay. Rely on me to put us on a tangent. All right, back on track. So let's talk about themes. You have Carbonate. Tell us about that a little bit. Hand coded, your baby. So I use it on a couple sites. Just disclosure.
Yeah.
So tell us about it.
Yeah, it is. I have 3 websites live right now that are all using it, and all it is I told you that I've never used a theme in my life. So the only theme I've ever used is my theme. So I've been coding themes for clients and, for myself since I guess I want to say like 2010, professionally. And this is so Carbonate is, 10 to 15 years of like the same theme getting simpler and faster and it every single site that you see that I own that's incredibly fast and elegant is Carbonate. It's like I took all of that and just like repackaged it for everyone, it's super light. I mean, there's like, it's only the pages you need for a content. It's built for a content website. Because people have asked me, can you use it like for a WooCommerce store or whatever? And I'm like, I guess. I mean, it's really just the simplest theme of all time. There's not much CSS. There's no JavaScript in it whatsoever. You can use, it requires Yoast, but if you switch to rank math, it's one line of code that you have to change and it works. And so, yeah, it's super flexible, but the gripe is that it's there's no builder behind it. There's no updates. Like you're not going to get an update that's going to break your site. So there are updates, like I make updates to the code base, but you have to re-download it and do it and like add it yourself, or like, you would add it as a separate theme and then make sure it worked and then switch over to the new version. It's very customizable and it's a good base if you're thinking about doing something bigger and you want to hire a developer or a designer. It's a good base for a designer to start on, and then it can be like customized to no end because it's just it's just what you need and nothing else. I would even call it boilerplate. Like it's got a philosophy attached to it too. So there's like it doesn't have a sidebar. There's only 4 links in the header, and that's all designed on purpose. And yeah, it's just kind of, it is what it is. And I like it that way. And it does well.
It's a good minimal theme.
Yeah.
Like you said, just what you need, nothing else. You can add other stuff.
Oh, you can go nuts.
It's a great platform to do that. If you had some different vision, you wanted to tweak things, there's nothing extra on there that you have to remove. You can just
you're just all adding to it. Yeah.
Which is great, because what you don't want is like the theme builder or either the theme builder or a theme that is good for a magazine.
Yeah. And then you have to, you're shoehorning your ideas into it. Yeah.
And then you have to remove a ton of stuff. This is just what you need. And it's the look that I wanted for certain websites. Like you said, no sidebar, not a huge menu, right? What are people going to do with like 25 choices and sub menus at the top?
Exactly. Well, and the biggest thing is because like everyone's on a mobile device, so when I looked at Swim University, for example, like 80% of my visitors are on a mobile device. So 80% of my visitors to my website never see a sidebar. So I was like, I probably don't need a sidebar. Especially if there's important information in that sidebar that 80% of people are not seeing, well, then it sort of begs the question of like, why? And so like, yeah, I think that's, basically the reason, since it's a mobile first design, and it's built for that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So one gripe with Carbonate is you have to get into the code. So is there any way around that?
There's no way around it. The way I combated that was by, I have an entire course that comes with it. So you get the theme, you get the zip file that you can upload, but then it also has like a course on how to do all the things. So there's tutorials on, you want to change the header color, you want to change the logo, you want to change what the navigation says, you want to change, it teaches you how to do all that. And then all of the code itself, and you could do it all within WordPress. Like you don't need a separate coding software. So you can do it in the code editor of WordPress. And I did try to comment a lot of the code so that there's literal instructions in the code that tells you what you can and cannot change. So I personally think if you know how to use a computer, you can change things on Carbonate as long as you stick within the parameters of Carbonate. When you want to start getting more creative and adding on things and changing things that are a little bit more complicated and you don't know what you're doing, then yes, you're probably going to run into problems. But and there is no support besides the course that comes with Carbonate. And I'm always adding things to the course because once you buy it, you get the zip file, but you also get the course, and that course is always updated. Because sometimes people in my community will say like, "Oh, I want to add a sidebar," and I'm like, that doesn't really fit the philosophy of it, but here's how you would do it, and here's the code snippet, and here's where you would add it. Here's what you'd have to replace to make it work. So there is support in that context, and if you want like actual support, I do have a community where you can ask questions and like get code snippets and stuff on the fly.
Right. Okay.
So,
and then quick note, you mentioned people on mobile not seeing the sidebar, and that is just because the sidebar gets pushed to the bottom on a mobile device. So technically they could see it, but most likely they are not going to keep scrolling all the way to the very bottom and look at all of your sidebar content.
Right.
So that said, I will recommend, if you have some coding background or you're comfortable with it or you want to give it a shot, Carbonate is great. You can check out Swim University, Brew Cabin, Money Lab.
Mm-hmm.
I use it over on my podcast site. What is it called? Mile High Fi. Yeah, Mile High Fi podcast. So we're using it over there. So it it does a fine job. You could check the speed, right? You could check the speed on all these sites. And you'll see how crazy fast it is.
Yeah.
I'll make a recommendation for the Focus WordPress theme. If you want to not have to touch code and a little bit more of a platform, there's more to it, but not much. It is also very minimal. If you just load it and you check the size and the number of files and
requests,
it's
pretty low,
pretty close to what Carbonate is. So it's minimal, very fast.
Sweet.
So, all right, moving on. So we talked about themes. Let's talk about just core web vitals. I'm interested in your impression. Do you think it's going to be a big deal or not as big? I mean, we've been talking about it seems like about a year.
Yeah.
So do you think it's going to have a huge impact or minor?
Huge. I mean, but I've been singing this, like I've been beating this drum for like 5 or 6 years. So it's easy for me to say because what I've been saying for the longest time is page speed is incredibly important because it allows a smaller company to compete with larger companies. It's the underdog advantage because it takes a lot of manpower to take an established website and change all of the code and fix everything to make it fast. There are even SEO people who refuse to change their site because they've invested so much into how it looks that they're like, it's just not worth, the move. And I'm like, well, if there's anyone that's going to contend with those people, it's going to be the guy with the super lightning fast site and the killer content, or the person with the lightning fast site and the killer content. It's the 1-2 punch, and so my whole theory and what I've been saying for forever is like, why wouldn't you, if you have the ability to make your website incredibly fast, why wouldn't you? Like, there's no harm in doing it. If anything, your customers, your visitors will thank you, and it'll make them realize that other websites load like shit. And so it's just that demand, and as the internet itself gets faster, but the websites don't, people are going to get more and more frustrated with slow websites. And that creates a bad search experience. And Google is not dumb. They're going to want, they look at Google. Google loads in like seconds. It's like, or not seconds, like it's instant. It's like before you could even blink, it's up. And that's what they want websites websites to perform. And so I just don't see how it can't be. And then like how like page speed is like, oh, don't worry about it. And then all of a sudden they come out with this Core Web Vitals thing. And all of a sudden now it's like, oh, Google's taking page speed seriously. And then it's like, oh, it's the update's coming. And it's like, all right. And then everyone scrambled within the last like 2 or 3 months to get their websites fast. And the ones who can't are the ones that are going to see a decrease for sure. So I think it's important, if that's the roundabout way of saying that.
So I'm going to disagree.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to be as big. I don't think it's going to be as big of an impact.
What would be the equivalent that happened like before? Like, what has Google done that, we all thought, uh-oh. And then they ended up like, I think it's going to be as big as Eat.
Well, I was going to say, I think for my sites load pretty fast.
Yeah.
Yours do too.
Yeah.
A lot of people have fast loading sites. So we're not going to really see an impact. Do you think you're going to see a jump?
You will leapfrog those who are if there are, I think if you have people above you with crappy, slow sites and you're like, and they're huge companies and you are the underdog, I think you're going to see leapfrogging. So yes, I think if you're like right under everybody, you might see a bump. But I don't think, the people who are already like super fast and at the top, no, you're not going to see a bump. Or even super fast and then everybody else above you super fast, like, no, you're not going to see a bump.
And I think that's
what you're saying.
I think a lot of people have cleaned up stuff. There's probably some outliers here and there.
Yeah, it really depends on the industry that you're in.
I think it's going to be less than.
And you could be right, but I do think it's going to be as important as what Eat was to to Google. Like the whole how the medic update. So it was like, this whole idea of credibility that is like baked into Google's algorithm now. And and it's really hard because it's like, the Your Money, Your Life was the other, like, be careful because that's where, you start doing content that's, talking about stock picking and crypto and, things that can like advice that can seriously ruin people's lives. All of a sudden, like you see this credibility shift. I think that the Core Web Vitals is the next version of that. It's the usability shift that's happening. And you're right. It couldn't be huge, but I think you're going to see a lot of Goliaths topple is what I think is going to happen.
I usually don't like to make predictions because, it's just
that's
a
fair.
guess.
I know it's a guess. But I hope a lot of crappy big websites topple.
I hope so. I hope to see.
Yeah, I hope to see that.
Because as a user of websites, I don't like to go to a slow website. So,
but Google's investing a lot into this whole concept. Like they have, Lighthouse and their page speed insights is built online. Like Lighthouse is it's a huge part of what they do. So I think, for them to have this whole thing come out and then it just sort of be nothing feels like, well, then why the hell, it's kind of like the author update, right? When that came out and everyone's like, oh, you got to put the author bio in the, and it's like, and then they just took it away.
Actually, that's a great point.
Yeah.
So it's like, all this fucking prep work, all of this talking for a long time.
Yeah.
People implement tools. It's a big fucking deal. And then they're like, hey, you know what? Like people are not using Google Plus. So
forget it. Yeah. But this feels more core. It's called Core, Web Vital. So it feels more rooted in their algorithm than say like, oh, you have to add a markup schema for authors so that your picture appears in the SERPs. If it had anything to do with what appears in the SERPs, I'd say like take it with a grain of salt, because Google's constantly testing that, and like things come and go all the time. Like I noticed that on YouTube the other day, I was ranking for the new video that I put out, and the description was captions for my video and not actually the description I wrote. And I'm like, so that doesn't matter.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And okay, so it's good that we're just not agreeing with each other. So one last point, and then I have a normal sidebar like I would have. So
no sidebar. We just said that.
with the author and Google Plus and all that stuff, I know that when we were going through it back then, it also felt like a big deal.
That's true.
And you can go back and listen to old podcasts, Smart Passive Income or whatever, and everyone will say, this is the most important fucking thing. And that's what we have to do as people that are producing content.
Right.
And it's the information that we have. So this one could be a big one. It could be one that sticks around, or it could be one where it's like, oh, you know what? Whatever.
So I agree. But I mostly ignore those things. Like I didn't get on board with that. You know, like that specific example. But most examples I don't get on board with. I've just always been on board with page speed.
That's the thing.
Yeah, and it just happens to coincide with like my philosophy already. So I'm like, of course it's going to be a big deal, because I've been saying it's going to be a big deal for 5 years.
Right. And it helps, bounce rate and people get to your site.
Right.
And all that stuff. Okay. Yeah. Have your site load fast. I'm not against it. I'm just saying like I don't trust Google.
And you shouldn't. You absolutely shouldn't.
All right. So the sidebar thing, so we're talking EAT, right?
Yeah.
And we're talking about it being a big deal. And then thinking about YouTube, also part of Google. And then talking about stock picking. So I've seen so many channels blow up with like crypto, stock picking. Yeah. These people, some of them know what they're talking about. Handful of them are straight out of college. Maybe they're still in college. And they don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
Right.
And their channels blow up. So I'm interested at some point if there's going to be an EAT for YouTube, especially around the financial stuff, because I've seen so many channels blow up and it's like, hey, what stocks are we picking today?
Yeah.
And it's like
I think they got bigger fish to fry at the moment with the child content in that problem. But I definitely think that's coming for sure, but I don't notice it as much because I don't really follow financial stuff on YouTube, but I do know it's a problem. Like I do know it's a serious problem. But then there's also like the wellness, the makeup stuff. Like there's a lot of I don't know if I should lump those things together, but it feels like there's a lot of health gurus out there on YouTube, and that that can be a problem too. Especially when you're like, if you want to lose weight, drink this lemon juice cayenne and then, shit out a mile-long snake and then never eat anything for the rest of the day. And it's like, and you're going to lose weight. And also cocaine. Cocaine works too. And it's like, it's like we're now microdosing cocaine for weight loss. It's like, okay, someone's got to daddy's got to step in and, police it in a way.
I heard meth is good for that too.
Meth is good. Yeah, I've heard that too. I think I saw it on YouTube.
All right. So let's somehow
that's all a bit.
Yeah, somehow we ended up talking about meth
I mentioned
and cocaine.
I don't know. I always go there.
Core Web Vitals. There's 3 things or some initials here. We wrote them down. So Matt, what are these? Because I'm having a hard time with them just in general.
Okay.
And my site loads fast, but sometimes I still have issues with the
which
things.
One?
The
CLS?
The LCP. So what do they stand for first? So what are they?
Okay, so there's CLS, which stands for Cumulative Layout Shift. There's LPC, and I'm just reading the acronyms. Large Contentful Paint. And then FID is First Input Delay. And I did a lot of in the community, a lot of people, I said to people, hey, in May was our page speed challenge. And I said, if send me your website and I will do a video showing you like how to fix all these things like on your site. And the one I saw the most problem with was Cumulative Layout Shift. That's a usability thing. It's not a speed thing. The idea is, I guess it could be labeled as a speed thing, but it's mostly like it's a jarring experience when you load a page and something moves. You know, it's like the page loads and then like, you know, an image like shifts to the left, or like the logo like was big and then it gets small again. And that's all that is. And it's because, you know, you might load something with no dimensions, and then, you know, it's just like the image loads and the image is massively huge. And then the CSS loads, which has the dimensions in it. And then the dimensions, like, then it does that move. So the idea is that you want to, you know, have all of your elements fixated so that they don't have that shift. You know, so it happens a lot with images and divs where if you have width and height, you know, attributes in CSS, it might be too slow, where you'd have to add those directly into the code, you know, or inline CSS. So it happens mostly with logos, I would be honest. Like I see it mostly with logos, and, you know, very, very rarely with divs. You know, obviously, if you have JavaScript loading, say like an ad or something, like some sort of like, you know, element, but the div is really small, but then when the JavaScript finally loads, like the div gets big, that can be really jarring to the eye. And so Google's going to catch that. So it has technology that catches that stuff, which you can find in PageSpeed Insights. And then, what was it? LCP is largest contentful paint. So that one is the largest element on your site to load. So above the fold. So, you know, if you have like a hero image at the top, that might be your largest content, right? It's like your largest div. And so the idea that is your largest div, and I hope I'm getting this right, your largest div needs to be like the fastest, because the other ones are just like, they're smaller. So if you're having trouble with that, it's most likely due to lazy loading. So you're loading way too many things at once, and and a lot of them are like, you know, pretty insanely large. And so like the idea is to get those things to load to feel smaller, and then only load when the user needs them. Lazy loading, I think, will solve that problem for sure. And same with the YouTube thing we talked about. And then the other one was a first input delay. That's the amount of time it takes for you to actually be able to click a button. So just getting things to, you know, elements that are like clickable to load quick. So I don't use JavaScript to load buttons. It's like just, you know, load a button, and, you know, basically like if you have like a navigation that loads and you can click it immediately, like that's the first input delay.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I got that correct, but I mean, obviously you can read exactly what they are. And I use a combination of PageSpeed Insights as the test. So PageSpeed Insights is Google. It's using Lighthouse, and they will tell you what's wrong. But I think a better and more technical test would be using GT metrics with an X at the end. They will there's a waterfall chart that shows you the order in which things are loading, and that's really helpful to see like what things are blocking other things from loading, and like what's taking the longest to load, like the individual, you know, images or elements that are taking forever to load. So that's really helpful. Those two tools, you know, you can, and you have to know how to read them. They're complicated. So I recommend like, you know, studying a little bit to like understand how to read them. But then once you do, it's like a superpower. It's great.
Yep. And I think for me, the largest contentful paint is the one that gives me trouble for one site. And one of my friends, Olga, she let me know that maybe it is some of the CSS for a particular site. She was like, it could be that goofing things up. And I thought, well, that's weird. You know, I'm using the same theme on a few sites, and I shouldn't have anything different. Then I remembered, I think I've added some CSS code myself, some custom CSS.
Right.
So I think maybe I screwed it up because my other sites are okay. And here's the little confusing part too. So my sites load fast, usually about half a second.
Yeah.
If I use Google PSI, the PageSpeed Insight, it scores in the 90s or higher, sometimes close to 100.
Yep.
yet. I still have
doesn't pass all the core web vitals.
Right. And it's the actual, user experience and core web vitals on the Search Console. So that's like the real data from real users.
Yeah.
And I've been blaming it on the individual users for having a slow connection or something like that. Cause I'm like, oh, fuck, if it loads in half a second, I mean, what else can I do?
Yeah.
So that part of it is that, cause I know, well, it's loading fast and it's probably fine, but I still have warnings on the LCP.
I'll say this, like, it's annoying to do, but it can also be a fun puzzle to solve. And I kind of look at it that way. Like, I sit down and even if I'm doing it for someone else, not doing the code, but if I'm like just reading, it's detective work. It's finding out like, all right, what's causing this? And let's try, to add this line of code and see if it, changes the speed. I find it fun to dissect that.
Well, I got a fun thing for you to do later then.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
All right. So I think we covered most of the things. There is one thing I want to ask you about though. So you famously don't run ads on your sites.
Correct.
Which I can appreciate. You don't like money, so that's cool.
I don't like it, no. It's more money, more problems, as they say.
When people have sites that run ads, they often trash the experience and they have trouble loading. So do you have any recommendations for people that run ads and they're looking to improve the site speed?
Yeah. So like in my community, there's a few people that, run ads, and that's kind of why I added a lesson on how to add a sidebar to Carbonate. Cause it's like, I run ads, man. And I'm like, okay, like, then here's how you do it. I didn't know, like, I don't use any ad networks, but the people that do have informed me and have informed the rest of the people who use it that I can say that Ezoic, Ad Thrive, and Media Vine, those three specifically, all have solved the problem of page speed because of Core Web Vitals. And it's just that you have to reach out to these companies and figure out how to implement it on your site, because it does take some proactivity to get it running. But I have people in the community who score 100 in page speed insights with ads, so it is very possible to do.
Yep.
And I don't know what I'm thinking of one person in particular. I'm not sure what he uses, but I've had people that were doing the page speed challenge with me, actually most of them have ads, and they all, were able to get scores, by contacting the companies that do the ads, and they've solved it. Great.
Yep. So that's perfect. I mean, they know their technology and the way to, I don't know what kind of shell game they're playing, to get it to load. And I mean, they're working closely with the Google engineers, I'm sure. So they have the proper technical solution. So it's optimized in the right way. But when I peel back everything, I'm like, how can it load that so fast? How can they score 100 if there's all this other stuff that is clearly going on?
I don't know how the technology works, to be honest, but have you heard about the third-party cookie update coming next year?
I have. Yeah.
So can you explain that to me?
I'm more of a headline reader.
So, okay. All right. So, yeah.
So I know about it, and I think
like Google's killing the third-party cookie, basically.
So something is happening. Yeah. Which it's going to change the
ad serving.
Right. So, but I mean, you run an ad blocker generally, right? So,
it's the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that, but I was going to say, like, for you, you're not seeing ads chasing you around the web.
Oh, that's right. So that goes away. So it's going to hurt how ads are, like, what ads are served, right? So you're going to have less control over the ads that are served, is what I'm understanding, right?
That sounds right. And I mean, I think now it's clear to everyone that I am just a headline reader. So I see stuff and I'm like, oh, you know what? I'll worry about it.
I've heard it's going to kill CPC numbers.
Right.
That's what I've heard. And I don't know when it's coming out, or if it's coming out, but it sounds like it's this whole privacy issue. Like, Apple was one of the first, big ones to do it. And it caused a lot of marketers grief with Facebook and stuff. So, I don't know. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Well,
I don't know. I was hoping you would know. Like, I know just as much as you do about it. So I was like, oh, you probably got your finger on the pulse of this.
I think my hunch is the companies that show ads, kind of like we're talking about, they figured out.
They figured it out. All right. So same with Facebook. Like they kind of figured out a way around it.
I assume there's going to be some little workaround. There's going to be other data that's going to be helpful, but yeah, there'll be some growing pains, I'm sure, and some issues here and there, but I'm sure they're going to figure it out so they can get those fucking ads in front of us all over the place.
Yes, serve me ads.
All right. Well, any other thoughts?
No, I don't think so.
All right. So I'll let you talk about your community just for a minute if you want to plug it at all.
MoneyLab Pro. So it's MoneyLab. I have a site called moneylab.co. If you want to go check that out, that's fun. And then I have a pro community with, me and Doug and a bunch of other entrepreneurs that are in there. And there's all my courses are available for a monthly subscription. I have 4 courses and then you get Carbonate as part of that and support for Carbonate. And then you get access to a community with like-minded entrepreneurs, and it's $49 a month.
Kick-ass. And there's a site speed course in there too, right?
A specific page speed for bloggers course, yeah. So page speed for WordPress course, you could call it.
Okay, and that is separate from the Carbonate training videos,
That is separate, yeah. That's that gets really technical and deep, yeah.
Okay, so I would say if you're interested in learning more about site speed, then that course would be super helpful. You get Carbonate included, and it's a community.
Yeah.
So I would say it's probably if you were thinking about it, it's probably
it's worth $49 to try it out. It's like at the very least.
I don't know how you make any money doing that, but okay.
Loyalty. The community is strong.
Very good.
Strong folks there. So
awesome. Well, thanks, Matt. Always good to catch up.
No, thanks, man.